The call came just after midnight. Hyung, you need to come to Seoul National University Hospital. Now. Lee Jae-hyun stopped moving. The penthouse office around him, floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul's skyline smeared in neon and rain, fell away. Only Park Sung-min's voice remained, thin and tight in his ear. Jae-hyun's tone dropped to something lethal. Who touched my people? It's Mireille. The name hit harder than any bullet. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the storm pounding against the glass. 8 months. 8 months since he'd watched Yoon Mireille sign their divorce papers with steady hands and dead eyes. 8 months since she'd walked out of their home and left him alone with his empire. Which room? He asked. 304, Sung-min said. Maternity ward. The line went dead. The phone slid from his fingers and slammed into the desk. Maternity ward. The words echoed and multiplied, becoming a roar in his skull. Mireille. Hospital. Maternity. 9 months for a pregnancy. 8 months since the divorce. The math lined up with cruel precision. His body moved before his thoughts caught up. He grabbed his coat and keys and strode for the door. Han Ki-tae, his second-in-command for logistics, nearly crashed into him in the hallway. Boss, the Shanghai shipment. Cancel everything. Jae-hyun didn't slow. Ki-tae blinked. The meeting with the Russians. I said cancel it. People usually didn't argue when he used that tone. Ki-tae didn't now. In the elevator, the mirrored wall showed him a stranger. A man in a tailored black suit, jaw clenched, eyes colder than the rain outside and yet burning with something frantic beneath. The head of the Chongryong syndicate. The man other men crossed themselves over. Right now he felt like none of that mattered. If she was pregnant, it's mine. The rational part of his brain tried to speak. There are other reasons to be in a maternity ward. Maybe she's visiting someone. Maybe it has nothing to do with you. But another voice, older, sharper, the instinct that had kept him alive since the alleys of Busan, whispered. You already know the answer, don't you? He did. In the underground garage, his Aston Martin purred to life with a growl. He shot out into the rain-slicked streets, ignoring traffic lights, the city a blur of red and white and blue streaking past. From outside, anyone would have seen a powerful man driving too fast in the rain. From inside, I felt like a boy again, 17, broke, helpless, watching my father bleed out on dirty concrete, realizing I was too late to stop it. That same uselessness crawled up my spine now, icy and suffocating. As he drove, memories attacked him. Mireille laughing in their kitchen, flour on her nose. Mireille waiting up for him with tired eyes and fake smiles. Mireille the day she left, her voice calm when she said, I can't love a ghost, Jae-hyun. He'd thought she was being dramatic. He'd told himself she'd come back once she calmed down. He'd thrown himself even deeper into work, into the Chongryong, telling himself he was building something that would one day give them freedom. Now the cost of that lie was waiting for him in a hospital. If this moment already has your heart racing, pause for a second and hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens between them next. This is where their story truly begins. The hospital loomed out of the rain like a lighthouse, all white light and sterile glass. Jae-hyun pulled into the emergency lane and left the car there, not caring about rules, fines, or the shouting security guard he brushed past. 3rd floor. Maternity ward. The elevator seemed designed to torture impatient men. Each floor number glowed red, then slowly changed. By the time the doors opened, his entire life felt like it was balancing on something fragile. The hallway smelled like disinfectant and baby powder. Soft lighting, pastel walls, quiet voices. A world he had never imagined himself in. A world that didn't fit the man who made his fortune in backrooms and shadowed docks. Room 304 stood halfway down the corridor. His feet stopped outside it. Through the small square of reinforced glass, he saw her. Yoon Mireille lay propped up against white pillows, hair damp with sweat and messily tied back. Her cheeks were pale. There were shadows beneath her eyes. But she was still the most breathtaking thing he'd ever seen. In her arms, wrapped in a blue blanket, was a tiny bundle. The world narrowed to that small shape. The baby's face was scrunched and red, with a shock of dark hair and a faint widow's peak, just like Jae-hyun's. One tiny fist had escaped the blanket, fingers curled. His chest tight, he rested one hand against the glass. My son, something inside him whispered. Mine. For a few seconds he couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Mireille shifted, adjusting the baby. As she did, her gaze lifted and she saw him. Their eyes locked. So many things crashed silently between them in that look. 8 months of absence, a marriage that had crumbled, old love, new wounds, the existence of the child in her arms. Her expression didn't crumble. She had always been composed. But something in her eyes flickered, hurt, anger, maybe regret. Sungmin appeared beside him, slightly out of breath. He followed Jaehyun's stare and exhaled softly. She didn't want you to know, Sungmin said. She told everyone not to call you. Jaehyun's jaw locked. You called anyway. I couldn't let you miss this, Sungmin said. Whatever you've done, whatever she feels, this child is yours too. Jaehyun's hand tightened on the door handle. His entire life he'd walked into rooms where deals could turn bloody, where men planned coups, where guns might be waiting. He'd never hesitated. Now, in front of a maternity ward door, his fingers shook. Hyung, Sungmin said quietly, if you don't go in now, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Regret? He already had plenty. But this felt different. Bigger. What did I do to become the kind of man my wife couldn't trust with our child? The thought landed like a verdict. The door swung open. A nurse stepped out, clipboard in hand. She flinched slightly when she saw him. Almost everyone did the first time. His presence filled the doorway, tall frame in a dark suit, eyes that suggested he'd seen too much. I'm sorry, sir, she began, trying to sound firm. Immediate family only for now. A voice came from behind her. Let him in. Mireille's voice. Quiet. Flat. The nurse hesitated, then stepped aside. Jaehyun crossed the threshold. Felt in a strange way like crossing into a different life. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing them in. Up close, Mireille looked even more exhausted. Sweat still dotted her temples. Her lips were dry. The hospital gown hung loose around her collarbones. But there was a new softness around her arms, her body wrapped around the baby like a shield. Mireille, he said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. She didn't look at him at first. Her gaze remained on the infant in her arms. His name is Lee Tae-oh, she said. He was born 2 hours ago. 6 pounds 7 ounces. Healthy. She'd given him the family name. Lee. She'd tied the child to him, even while cutting herself free. The realization sank like a stone. He's mine, Jaehyun said. It wasn't a question. His instincts had never been wrong about life and death. They were screaming certainty now. Mireille finally looked up. You really think I would carry another man's child while I was married to you? She asked quietly. For all your faults, Jaehyun, I never thought you'd question that. Shame burned under his skin. I don't. I just. He exhaled. Why didn't you tell me? Her laugh was small and humorless. When exactly should I have told you? Between your midnight meetings and the days you didn't come home at all? Should I have left a message with Kitae's assistant? By the way, your wife is pregnant, but don't worry, I know your empire matters more. Every word landed like a blade. He had earned each one. I would have come back, he said. Even as he said it, he heard the uncertainty in his own voice. If I'd known. That's exactly why I didn't tell you, she cut in. Her eyes shone. Not with tears, but with the dull, steady burn of someone who'd been disappointed too many times to cry again. I didn't want you to show up out of obligation. I didn't want our child to be another appointment you squeezed in between arms deals and territory negotiations. He wouldn't have been an appointment, Jaehyun said. He's my son. You didn't even know he existed until tonight. He had no defense for that. She shifted Tae-oh slightly. A tiny sound came from the baby's lips. A soft, unconscious sigh. The noise went through Jaehyun like lightning. Do you want to know when I found out I was pregnant? Mireille asked. 2 days before I asked you for a divorce. He stared at her. The world seemed to tilt. I took 3 tests, she said. All positive. I sat alone in our penthouse, the one you loved more than being at home. And I tried to decide what kind of life I wanted for my child. Her fingers stroked Tae-oh's cheek. The baby's mouth twitched. I imagined him waiting at the window every night asking, "Where's Appa?" Mireille continued. I imagined you missing birthdays, school events, first steps. I imagined explaining to our son that his father loved his business so much he forgot how to love anything else. That's not fair, he said, even though some part of him knew it was. Isn't it? She asked. Silence hung between them. The only sound was Tao's soft breathing. Can I? He swallowed. His throat felt raw. Can I hold him? Mireille looked at him for a long time. The weight of her gaze was heavier than any gun he'd had pointed at his head. Finally, she nodded toward the sink. Wash your hands first. He obeyed without argument. Warm water, liquid soap, the harsh white light above the mirror. These hands have broken men. Signed contracts that ended lives. Built an empire from fear. And now I'm about to hold the only person I'm terrified of dropping. He dried his hands slowly, then came back to the bedside. Mireille showed him how to hold the baby, guiding his arms into position. Her fingers brushed his wrist. Once that touch would have sent fire through him. Now it felt like touching a life he'd already lost. She carefully transferred Tao into his arms. For a second he panicked. The baby felt impossibly small, impossibly warm. His head was fragile, his neck delicate. Jaehyun adjusted his grip, terrified of making a wrong move. Tao's eyes stayed shut, but his tiny fingers curled, catching on the fabric of Jaehyun's sleeve. Something inside him cracked. Hi, he whispered, voice hoarse. Hi, Tao. The name tasted strange and sacred on his tongue. The word caught. Appa. The idea felt too big for his chest. I'm your father. Tao made another soft noise. I'm sorry, Jaehyun whispered. He wasn't entirely sure who he was apologizing to. The baby, Mireille himself. Maybe all three. I should have been here. I should have known. He looked up. Mireille was crying for the first time that night, tears sliding quietly down her cheeks. I can't go back to how it was, she said. Not for you. Not even for him. I won't raise my son in a home where his mother is slowly dying inside. I know, he said. For the first time in years he really did. I destroyed us, he continued. I chose the Chongryong over you. Over us. Over any chance at a family that wasn't paid for in blood. You did, she agreed. But I'm not walking away from him, Jaehyun said. His voice steadied. Or from you. Not this time. And what about your organization? She demanded. What about your empire? You think you can just be a father and nothing else? He thought of the men who depended on him, the structures he built, the enemies waiting for any sign of weakness. He thought of long nights at the office, of always being one step ahead of danger. Then he looked down at his son's face. In that moment, the scale he'd been balancing his life on tipped. If it comes down to it, he said quietly, I'll choose him. Mireille stared at him like she didn't recognize him. You'd give up the Chongryong? She asked. He thought of his father's body in an alley. Of the vow he'd made never to be powerless again. Of the 15 years he'd spent turning himself into something untouchable. I don't know how, he said. I don't know what that looks like. But yes, if staying in that world means losing him, then I'll walk away. The words terrified him. Saying them out loud made them real. But they also felt right. For the first time in a very long time, he was choosing something for himself, not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of love. If seeing a cold Mafia boss crack open for his newborn son hits you too, tap subscribe now and stay with this story. Things are only going to get more intense from here, and you don't want to miss how far he'll go to change. The rain hadn't stopped since that night at the hospital. It sounded different now, softer, steadier. Like a heartbeat reminding Jaehyun that time was still moving. Every dawn, before Seoul's traffic found its rhythm, he stopped at Mireille's apartment. He brought breakfast from her favorite bakery. Red bean buns, sea salt coffee, sometimes rice porridge. Some mornings she opened the door with a tired thank you. Other mornings she took the bag through a narrow gap and closed the door without a word. He never complained. He simply left the hallway smelling faintly of coffee and rain. By day 3, the apartment door stayed open a little longer. Inside, the world looked nothing like his penthouse life. It was small, warm, cluttered with baby bottles, soft blankets, and the delicate chaos of new motherhood. He stood awkwardly near the shoes until the sound of crying filled the space. Mireille, hair tangled, eyes rimmed in red, bounced a squirming Teo against her shoulder. He won't stop, she whispered, voice cracking. Give him to me, Jaehyun said gently. She hesitated. Then she surrendered the baby, her movements careful but heavy with exhaustion. Jaehyun took Teo. Unsure how someone so small could feel so heavy, he paced the room murmuring softly. It was instinct, nothing calculated, nothing taught. The baby's whimpers softened until he drifted back to sleep. Mireille exhaled, shoulders sagging. You still remember how to hold your people together, she murmured. Except the one who mattered most, he said. Her eyes flicked to his, pain and surprise mingling there. Mireille sank onto the couch. The next words came almost as a sigh. You should go. You have business. He looked down at his son's tiny hand gripping his thumb. No, I don't. He stayed until both mother and child were asleep. When he finally left, Seoul's streets had brightened with early sunlight, and for the first time in years the city looked alive instead of hostile. At noon, Jaehyun's phone lit up, Sungmin's name flashing again and again. Hyung, came the urgent voice when he finally answered. The old guard's restless. Kwon Jin-ho says you're distracted. Serpents grabbed one of our warehouses in Gangnam. Then call a meeting, Jaehyun said, sliding behind the wheel. Tonight. I'll be there. He hung up and stared through the windshield. The rain had slowed to mist, the city a gray reflection of his own unease. That night he met the inner circle at a pojangmaka under the bridge in Hongdae. Cheap food, cheap soju, plastic chairs that bent under the weight of expensive suits. It was an image that belonged to their beginnings, before luxury had softened them. Jin-ho didn't bother with greetings. You've been gone a week, he snapped. Rumors say the boss fell in love again. Jaehyun poured soju for him across the rickety table. Rumors are free, he said. Truth costs loyalty. What happened to you, Hyung? Jin-ho demanded. When we started, you told us feelings made you weak. Now you're babysitting? The serpents smell blood. They're moving because they're predictable, Jaehyun replied. Not because I'm weak. Then prove it, Jin-ho said. Make an example. Jaehyun looked up, rain streaking against the thin plastic roof. And become my father? Rule by fear until there's nothing left worth protecting. Silence. Every man at that table knew how his father had died. Stabbed in a Busan alley by debt collectors after losing everything, leaving a boy with nothing but fury. I built the Chongryong to give us power, Jaehyun said quietly. Now I have to figure out how to live with it. He leaned forward. I want you all to understand something. Being human doesn't make us weaker. It keeps us from becoming monsters. We hold soul because we built something people respect, not fear. Jin-ho studied him long, then looked away. You're changing the rules, he muttered. Maybe it's time, Jaehyun answered. He left before the arguing resumed. Sungmin caught up to him outside. You okay? He asked. Jaehyun gave a thin smile. I'm learning to be. A week later, he arrived at Mireille's apartment carrying a folded stroller and a new baby monitor. You bought all this? She asked, startled. He shrugged. He deserves comfort. And maybe you'll sleep easier. She crossed her arms. You think buying things will fix what you broke? No, he said. But showing up might. That disarmed her more than any expensive gesture ever had. As they set up the stroller together, their hands brushed. The shock of contact startled them both. For a moment, the distance between them evaporated. Just two people fumbling with screws while their baby gurgled nearby. Then the doorbell rang. Mireille opened it to find her mother, Kim Sunhee, holding bags of food. I heard you were exhausted, Sunhee said, stepping inside. You need to eat properly. Her eyes caught Jaehyun standing near the bassinet. Her expression hardened instantly. What is he doing here? Mireille sighed. Iyama, please. Sunhee ignored her daughter and addressed Jaehyun directly. Haven't you hurt her enough? You build your empire on blood. And think you can wash it off with baby formula. Jaehyun bowed slightly. You're right to hate me, he said steadily. But I'm trying to be better. The honesty hung in the air, simple, unadorned. It silenced her more effectively than apology ever could. Sunhee exhaled. Eat before it gets cold then, she muttered, unpacking containers. Maya guk some side dishes. You need strength for feeding. Mireille smiled faintly across the room. A silent thank you passed between her and Jaehyun. They all ate together, awkward but peaceful. The first shared meal since the divorce. Taeo's small cries punctuated their silences like reminders of what mattered. When Sunhee finally left, Mireille turned to him. You handled that better than I expected. I've fought wars, he said quietly. But not with mothers. Despite herself, she laughed. And for the first time since the hospital, the tension cracked wide enough to let warmth through. Later that night, Taeo refused to sleep again. I'll walk him, Jaehyun said. Outside, neon lights shimmered off wet pavement as he paced the alley behind the building. The baby bundled beneath his coat. Inside those few square meters, the world shrank to the sound of soft breathing and rain. He thought about every rule that had once defined him: silence, control, dominance, and how useless they were against a 2-week-old baby who didn't care about empires. The phone in his pocket vibrated. He didn't take it out. For once he chose not to. Mireille watched from the kitchen window, arms folded, expression unreadable. The sight of Jaehyun rocking their son under a flickering streetlight etched itself into her memory like a photograph she knew she'd never delete. When he came back inside, she said softly, "He likes your heartbeat." "That makes one of us," he said, half smiling. "He's calmer around you," she admitted. "Maybe because I'm terrified of him," he said honestly. That earned another small smile from her. "Terror suits you." He looked up. "So does laughter." Something shifted then. A fleeting spark of the old them before power had poisoned the air between their hearts. She looked away first. "Don't read too much into this, Jaehyun." "I'm not reading," he said. "I'm remembering." Days passed, patterns formed. Jaehyun learned to sterilize bottles, survive sleepless nights, and translate baby cries into hunger, discomfort, or pure mystery. The man who once orchestrated a dozen criminal networks now treated lullabies like strategy sessions. But the outside world never stayed quiet for long. One evening, as dusk poured through the blinds, Sungmin arrived looking grim. "Bad news," he said. "The serpents attacked another shipment in Mapo. 2 of ours are in the hospital." Mireille stiffened. Taeo stirred. Jaehyun slowly set down the bottle in his hand. "Who's behind it?" "Park Young-jin," Sungmin said. "He's positioning himself as the new protector of Gangnam. And he's telling people you've gone soft." Mireille's voice cut across the tension. "You're not going." Both men turned to her. "Yes, I am," Jaehyun said. She walked closer, meeting his eyes. "You promised you'd choose him." "I am," he said gently. "By keeping the wolves away before they reach our door." She looked down at Taeo, then back at him. "Will you come back?" The question carried every fear she'd felt since the day she married him. "I will," he said. And this time she believed him, just enough to let him go. Hours later, Jaehyun faced the serpents in an abandoned mall lot lit by floodlights and cigarette sparks. The encounter was quiet, almost civil, until one of the younger serpents spat the words, "Your kid made you weak." Jaehyun's expression didn't change. But when he spoke, the air itself shifted. "Family doesn't make me weak," he said. "It makes you irrelevant." No gunfire, no bodies. Just a stare that sent them scattering. When he returned home near dawn, his suit damp, his eyes raw, Mireille was awake, sitting with Taeo in her arms. He paused in the doorway. "You're bleeding," she said. He glanced down, just a shallow cut along his jaw. An old friend forgot his manners. Her frown deepened. "This is exactly what I don't want for him." "I know," he said quietly. "Neither do I." He moved closer, kneeling beside her. "But I needed to show them that love isn't a weakness." "Then what is it?" she whispered. His gaze met hers. "The only thing worth killing the old me for." Something fragile and hopeful flickered between them, too new to name but impossible to deny. That morning, sunlight finally broke through the clouds. Mireille stood at the window, rocking Taeo as rays cut across the room. Jaehyun brewed coffee like muscle memory, then handed her a cup. Their fingers brushed again, deliberate this time. "Do you ever wish we could start over?" she asked quietly. "We are," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. "Don't make promises you can't keep." "I'm not," he said. "This time I'm making choices." He looked at his son, eyes closed against her shoulder. He's the only empire I want to build. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent, busy, alive. Inside that small apartment, time slowed to something sacred. If you felt the shift, the frozen crime boss learning to be human, tap subscribe now and stay until the end. The fight for love isn't over. And what comes next will test every word he just spoke. The night Jaehyun decided to step back from the Chongryong, Seoul seemed quieter than usual. He almost believed it was peace. But peace, he knew, was always the silence between threats. 3 weeks after Taeo's birth, the apartment started to feel almost normal. There were morning walks under pale skies, grocery trips that left Mireille smiling behind a mask, evenings where lullabies drowned out city noise. Jaehyun measured progress not in business deals but in seconds of softness. Mireille had stopped flinching when he came too close. Sometimes she even laughed at his awkward attempts to burp their son. For the first time, I began to imagine a life that didn't bleed power. A life with her laughter instead of gunfire. Then, as always, reality called. Sungmin arrived one afternoon, expression grim. "Hyung, someone left this outside your office." He placed a small package on the table. No return address. Only the blue dragon symbol crossed by a serpent's fang. Inside, a single photograph. Mireille and the baby outside her building. Below it, a note. "Even gods can be killed through their families." Mireille's face drained of color. "Oh my God," she whispered, clutching Taeo to her chest. "They followed us." Jaehyun's hands clenched before he could stop himself. "No one should have known where you live." "How did they find out?" she demanded. "You promised we were safe." "I'll handle it," he said automatically. "That's what you always say," she snapped. "Then you disappear and come back with more blood on your hands." He didn't answer because she was right. That night, he made a call he'd promised himself he wouldn't. "Kwon Jin-ho," he said into the phone. "Assemble who's left in Gangnam. We end this quietly." He should have told Mireille. He didn't. 2 hours later, in a dim garage beneath an abandoned high-rise, the Chongryong met the serpents. Words turned to violence fast, metal clanging, shouts echoing. Jaehyun moved like a storm, controlled, relentless, but even storms lose direction. When the dust settled, the serpents were bleeding. Jin-ho was limping, and one of Jaehyun's men lay motionless near the wall. He stared at the body, feeling the weight of it in his throat. This wasn't power anymore. It was corrosion. Sungmin's voice broke the silence. "You can't keep doing this, Hyung. You're trying to live two futures that can't coexist." "I know," Jaehyun said quietly. "Tonight decided which one survives." He didn't notice the small security camera in the corner recording everything. The video leaked by morning. News outlets didn't name names, but everyone in Seoul's underworld watched the same grainy clip. Masked men, guns drawn, symbols clearly visible. Mireille found out before he even came home. She stood at the door, eyes red. "There's blood on the news, Jaehyun." "Your blood." He froze. "Mireille, I let you near our son because I thought you wanted to change. But you're still that man. Taeo deserves a father who protects him. He deserves one who lives." Her voice trembled but didn't break. "Leave. Before they follow you here." "Mireille, go." He left, heartburning. He told himself it was safer. Sometimes lies are the only currency a man like him can afford. 3 days later, Sungmin showed up at the hotel where Jaehyun was hiding. "We've got a bigger problem," he said. Jin-ho sold information. That's how they found Mireille. The betrayal hit colder than any wound. "Where is he?" "His crew took shelter near the docks." Jaehyun holstered his gun but paused at the door. He looked at the mirror and saw not a boss, not even a father, just the boy from Busan again chasing ghosts. "Maybe this is what I was born for. To lose everything I touch until there's nothing left to protect." But when he thought of Taeo's tiny hand around his finger, something flared. Not rage but resolve. He found Jin-ho where the sea met the edge of Seoul. "I protected you for 15 years, Jaehyun said quietly. "And you sold my family." "You were soft," Jin-ho spat. "I saved the Chongryong from dying with you." Jaehyun didn't raise his weapon. He just said, "Then you'll understand what death means when it isn't in the shadows." When he walked away, Jin-ho's empire crumbled behind him. Figuratively, mercifully, without vengeance on film. He wasn't that man anymore. 2 days later, he stood again outside Mirei's apartment. Rain fell like the night they'd met. When she opened the door, surprise widened her eyes. "What are you doing here?" "Keeping a promise," he said. "It's over. The serpents are gone. So is Jin Ho." Her gaze searched his face. "At what cost?" He sighed. "Everything I didn't mind losing." Teo cooed in her arms, unbothered by the weight of adult silence. Mirei stepped aside slowly, letting him in. "If you lie to me again, Jaehyun." "I won't," he said. "There's nothing left to hide behind." That evening they sat together watching Teo sleep. No music, no words, just shared exhaustion and the faint sound of traffic far below. Maybe redemption isn't a miracle. Maybe it's just staying when you used to run. A week later, Jaehyun called the remaining lieutenants together. Sungmin, a few loyalists, no one else. "I'm stepping down," he announced. Sungmin blinked. "You're serious?" "I'm done trading love for control. You lead now. Protect people through order, not fear." "You really think you can walk away?" someone muttered. Jaehyun smiled faintly. "I already did." He turned his back on 15 years of empire. And for the first time no one followed him out the door. Mirei woke to find him cooking breakfast, awkwardly but earnestly. "You're burning the eggs," she said. "I'm experimenting with texture," he answered. She snorted, and the tension in the room finally cracked into laughter. Teo gurgled from his crib. Jaehyun scooped him up, smiling at the small weight in his arms. "This is it," he said. "No boardrooms. No deals. Just us. Can you handle that kind of powerlessness?" she teased gently. "I can handle you," he said. "The rest can burn." She looked up at him, eyes steady, soft, and for the first time since everything fell apart, she reached out. Her fingers brushed his cheek. "Then maybe we start again." Later, at the park near the river, they walked beneath cherry blossoms. Jaehyun pushed the stroller with one hand, Mirei's fingers loosely laced with his in the other. In this world no one whispered Chongryong. No one looked twice. They were just another small family under pastel skies. Mirei glanced sideways. "Do you ever think about what you left behind?" "Every day," he said. "But for once, I'm not looking back to regret. I'm looking back to remember why it had to end." She smiled, quiet, real. "Maybe ghosts aren't meant to be buried. Just forgiven." He stopped walking, kissed her temple and whispered, "Then forgive me one lifetime at a time." The wind scattered petals around them like blessings. If this moment touches you too, pause for a heartbeat and tap subscribe now. Because stories about second chances deserve to find those who still believe in them. Soul wore spring like armor. Blossoms blooming against the sharp scent of exhaust, sunlight fighting through city dust. To anyone else it was just another season. For Lee Jae-hyun it felt like his first chance to breathe. His mornings were the same now. Coffee that wasn't poured by an assistant, breakfast made with clumsy hands, and Mirei sitting across from him with the sleepy calm of someone rebuilding herself one quiet hour at a time. Teo gurgled on the living room rug, surrounded by toys that had replaced the heavy art pieces Jae-hyun once collected to impress people who didn't matter. He bent down, kissed the baby's forehead and murmured, "You're the only deal I'll never regret signing, little one." From behind him, Mirei's voice drifted in. "Careful. He might hold you to that one day." He looked up, smiling. "I hope he does." Their ease was new, cautious yet real. But peace, Jaehyun knew, rarely lasted for men with pasts like his. That afternoon their doorbell rang. When Mirei opened it, the sight of Sungmin's anxious expression made her stomach drop. She turned instinctively toward Jaehyun, who was already on his feet. "We need to talk," Sungmin said, stepping inside with the urgency of bad news. "What happened?" Jaehyun asked, taking the baby monitor's volume lower so Teo wouldn't wake. "Park Youngjin's taken the docks," Sungmin explained. "He's calling himself the new head of Chongryong." Mirei froze. "I thought you left that world." "I did," Jaehyun said. "Apparently it didn't leave you," Sungmin replied grimly. "The old networks still use your name. And now the serpents are feeding power to Youngjin. If they think you're weak or distracted, they'll come straight for the easiest target." He didn't have to say who that meant. Mirei's fingers tightened around her coffee mug until it cracked. No one should even know where we live, she whispered. They're guessing, Sungmin said. They'll get lucky if we don't move soon. Jaehyun turned toward Mireille. I'll take care of it. That's what you said last time, she said softly. And you came back bleeding. I wasn't protecting you before, he replied. Now I am. Her jaw set. You promised me no more violence. I'm not planning violence, he said. Just an ending. She stared at him long enough to know he meant it, but also long enough to see the weight pressing behind his calm. When Sungmin left, she asked quietly, Where do we go from here? Forward, Jaehyun said. Always forward. They left Seoul the next evening, the three of them. Jaehyun drove while Mireille sat beside him, their son asleep in the back seat. The highway stretched toward Busan, toward history. It felt like returning to the scene of every mistake and forcing them to stand trial. The ocean came into view like an old truth he couldn't avoid. I remember this road, Mireille said, watching the coastline appear. You drove me here once years ago before the rings, before the rules. You said it was your favorite place because the sea doesn't care who you are. He nodded. Still true. But you built your kingdom based on the exact opposite idea, where everyone cared too much who you were. He laughed softly. Guess we're both learning irony. She smiled a little, then looked away, eyes tracing the waves beyond glass. They reached the old warehouses near the port just after dark. It was here the Chongryong first began, back when control had felt like survival instead of disease. Sungmin's intel had been right. Youngjin waited inside, surrounded by men who wore arrogance like armor. Look who decided to visit the past, Youngjin drawled. I thought fatherhood had tamed the dragon. Jaehyun, and the silence that followed, did more than any intimidation tactics could. He simply stepped forward and placed an envelope on the table. What's this? Youngjin asked. My abdication, Jaehyun said. Every contract, account, connection. You want the title? Take it. But it ends there. My family is invisible to you from this moment on. Youngjin opened the envelope, scanning the pages. He started to smile. You really think walking away means freedom? This life doesn't forget you. Sooner or later it drags you back. Jaehyun met his gaze. Only if I let it. Youngjin studied him for a long moment. There was a flicker of uncertainty. Then with forced bravado he shrugged. Have it your way. But don't expect mercy if anyone else decides to come for what's left. I'm not asking for mercy, Jaehyun replied. Just a clean line between yesterday and tomorrow. He left the docks with Mireille beside him, the sea wind carrying salt and finality. The drive back was quiet. Mireille turned the radio on, low white noise filling the car. She finally asked, Why didn't you snap, Jaehyun? The old you would have shot him before he finished speaking. He glanced at her. Because the old me had nothing to lose. This time I had everything. Her expression softened. That's the first thing you've ever said that scared me for the right reasons. He smiled faintly. You have a dangerous effect on me. They reached Seoul just before sunrise. The apartment, still and warm, greeted them like a sanctuary they built with their own hands. Mireille placed Teo in his crib and whispered, Sleep now. Appa's done fighting. Over the next days, calm returned in ripples, not waves. They took turns with sleepless nights, shared unburned breakfasts, and rediscovered the strange humor of parenting. Sometimes Mireille caught him staring at her, like he was trying to memorize the details of simplicity. The way her hair fell as she bent to pick up their son, the small hum she made while folding laundry. He'd been surrounded by beauty his whole life, but this was different. This wasn't luxury. This was mercy. One morning she found him on the balcony, staring toward the skyline. It's strange, he said. I got so used to people following orders that I forgot how to just live. That's not strange, she said. That's trauma. He chuckled dry. Leave it to you to make redemption sound clinical. You wanted honesty, she said. I wanted you, he corrected softly. Her breath caught for a second. Then maybe you should start showing it. He reached out, brushed a stray hair behind her ear. I thought I was. You're trying, she said gently. Trying isn't the same as living. You still wait for permission to be happy. Her words hit deeper than any bullet ever could. Later that day, He went out with Sungmin to conclude final paperwork at a private bank. The clerk who processed it remarked, half joking, "Never thought I'd see the Blue Dragon King quit. The city's losing a myth." Jaehyun handed over the pen, his signature elegant and final. "Every myth ends," he said. "That's how stories make room for truth." When he returned home, Mireille was on the balcony again, Tae sleeping against her shoulder in a baby wrap. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Like I can breathe," he said. "Then breathe. Stop waiting for something bad to happen. You've earned quiet." "I don't know if I believe in earning peace," he admitted. "Then believe in giving it," she said. "To me. To him. To yourself." He stood beside her, the city's evening lights rising. "Do you ever miss who you were?" she asked after a while. He thought carefully before answering. "Sometimes. But the man I was would have let you walk away without chasing you. So no, I don't miss him enough to die with him." Mireille looked over her shoulder at him. "That might be the most romantic thing you've ever said." "Good," he said. "Because it's true." She smiled, small but radiant, and kissed him softly, like punctuation after an unspoken sentence. That night after Taeo's final feeding, they sat in the semi-dark living room, the sound of lullabies humming from a speaker, the city's glow splintering through the curtains. Mireille broke the silence. "Do you think people like us get happy endings?" He took her hand. "Only if we stop waiting for permission." She tilted her head against his shoulder. "That's easier said than done." "Not everything worth having should be easy," he said. The quiet between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of breath, of forgiveness, of the heavy relief that comes when two people finally stop running from themselves. If you've listened this far and felt every heartbeat of their rebuilding, pause a second, tap that subscribe button, and stay till the end, because the last part of this story will show you what love really looks like when the rain finally stops. Jaehyun exhaled slowly, the rhythm of Taeo's breathing from the nursery sinking to his own pulse. Outside, thunder rolled faintly, far enough away to feel harmless. He whispered, mostly to himself, "No more ghosts." Inside, Mireille's hand found his again. "No more ghosts," she echoed. The city didn't become safer overnight. He still read headlines about violence and corruption, but when he looked at his family, he finally understood that safety and love weren't the same thing. Safety was control. Love was trust. He'd spent years mastering one and only just begun learning the other. Later that week, Sungmin stopped by. He looked healthier, lighter. "It's strange," he said. "Without you, people are calmer. Less fear, more order." "Maybe monsters just needed rest," Jaehyun said. "Or maybe you were the only monster who remembered how to be human." He smiled, shaking his head. "Don't make me into a legend again. I just want to be someone's husband and father." Sungmin clapped his shoulder. "You already are." When he left, Mireille called from the kitchen. "Your friend's right." "About what?" "You always think you have to earn love. Maybe this time just accept it." Jaehyun walked over and wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Then consider me convinced." She laughed softly, leaning back into him. "About time." As night settled, he watched the skyline once more. The lights of Seoul shimmered below like constellations reshuffled every hour by human hands. Always building, always undoing. He realized that was what love was too. Constant construction after the destruction, repair after ruin. And maybe that was enough. If you felt the ache of second chances and the warmth of found peace, hit subscribe and stay for the final storm-clearing moments in episode 5, where rain gives way to sunlight and love proves stronger than the empire that once defined him. The city woke softly that morning, the afterglow of spring rain still clinging to glass towers. Seoul sounded different now. Less like sirens and more like heartbeats hidden beneath the hum of traffic. For Lee Jae-hyun, it had been 6 months since he'd walked away from the Chongryong. In that time, his definition of noise had changed. He used to measure it in gunshots and deals. Now it came in tiny ways. Taeo's laughter bouncing off kitchen tiles, Mireille humming while folding laundry, the kettle's whistle announcing another small normal moment. He poured coffee carefully like ritual. Mireille still said he was too meticulous, like every pour might decide the fate of the world, but he couldn't help it. When you've lived half your life with secrets, precision becomes prayer. The baby monitor crackled. Then came the soft babble that now dictated the house's schedule. He smiled to himself, placing both mugs on the table. Mireille appeared, hair everywhere, wrapped in sunlight. "You're awake early," she said. "Habit," he replied. "The sun rises, so do I." She sniffed the air. "Burning breakfast again?" "Not yet." Her smile, still cautious but warmer than before, reached her eyes. "He's crawling faster. You'll need protective gear soon." He handed her a cup. "I learned to survive boardrooms full of killers. I can survive my son." "You sure?" she teased. "He drools when he's happy and bites when challenged." "Sounds familiar." He laughed. "At least he's consistent." Later, while Teo sat between them happily smearing oatmeal across his tray, Jaehyun's phone buzzed. He hesitated. Those old vibrations always carried ghosts. Mireille watched him. "If it's that world calling, let it ring." He slid the phone aside. "Already did." They shared a glance that said more than words. It was trust, fragile but deliberate. That afternoon they went out. It was an ordinary errand run, diapers, groceries, nothing cinematic, but ordinary was new to Jaehyun. Mireille carried Teo. Jaehyun pushed the cart and pretended not to be fascinated by domesticity. Every mundane gesture felt strange and sacred. In aisle 6, a stranger recognized him, a mid-level fixer from the old days. "Boss." "Sorry, ex-boss," the man stammered. "Didn't expect to see you here buying formula." Mireille's hand tensed on the stroller handle. Jaehyun kept his tone gentle. "Just a man buying groceries," he said, then lowered his voice. "That life's gone." The man nodded quickly. "Of course. Just, everyone still talks about you." "They should stop," Jaehyun said. "Ghosts deserve rest." Later, Mireille said quietly, "You handled that better than I would have." He smiled. "Learning from you." Evening brought color to the windows, the golden hour painting their apartment warm. Teo sat in his walker, babbling proudly at every sound. Mireille traced her fingers over the piano keys she hadn't touched in years. "Do you remember this song?" she asked. Before he could answer, her hands coaxed out the melody of their wedding piece. Soft, hesitant, lovely. He leaned against the doorway. "You played that the night I asked you to move in." "I remember," she said. "You said music was the one thing that scared you." "Too honest." He nodded. "Still true." At the final note, she looked at him and whispered, "Then let it scare you." He crossed the room and kissed her, slow, uncertain, like forgiveness finding its breath. Days drifted, simple and eventful only by the standards of love, finally at peace. Then, near the end of summer, Sungmin visited again. He wore casual clothes but still carried that air of vigilance, like men who never stop watching doorways. "Everything stable?" Jaehyun asked. Sungmin nodded. "The new structure's working. Less violence. More trade. People actually sleep at night." "Good," Jaehyun said. Sungmin leaned forward. "And you?" "Sleeping. I'm learning how." "You ever regret walking away?" Jaehyun shook his head. "I was rich for 15 years and poor every day of it. Now I'm broke and finally alive." Sungmin grinned. "She's good for you. She's better than I deserve." When the door closed behind him, Jaehyun stood there for a while, the silence a warm kind instead of heavy. Mireille appeared, holding Teo on her hip. "Everything settled?" "Everything that should be," he said. Time played its small tricks. Months flickered by like pages turning. Teo learned to walk. Mireille started painting again. And Jaehyun, once feared for being untouchable, now spent afternoons at a local cafe reading real estate listings for seaside towns. "Busan again?" Mireille asked one evening. He nodded. "Thought we could open a bakery there." She raised a brow. "A bakery? I'm improving with breakfast," he said. "You handle the design. I'll handle the customers." "You plan to threaten them into buying bread?" "I might smile," he countered. She laughed. A sound that still felt like a gift he hadn't earned but received anyway. Autumn found them at the park. Leaves scattered around the stroller. Teo tried to grab them, squealing each time they slipped through his fingers. Mireille lifted her camera, capturing the moment. When she looked through the viewfinder, Jaehyun caught her gaze. "Freeze that one," he said. The second before perfect happiness moves on. Maybe happiness isn't supposed to freeze, she said. Maybe it's supposed to move. He thought about that all the way home. Later that night, rain began again for the first time in weeks, the soft kind that sounded like memory instead of warning. They watched it from the balcony, wrapped in one blanket while Teo slept. Mireille said, "You still check the windows every time it rains." "Habit," he admitted. Rain used to mean business was coming. And now it means I have someone waiting inside. She leaned against him. "Then why do you still look sad sometimes?" He hesitated. "Because peace feels temporary when you're built from chaos. I keep expecting something to break." "You can stop waiting for the sky to fall, Jaehyun. You're not that man." He took her hand. "Then who am I?" "Mine," she said simply. For once he didn't argue. Weeks later, during a storm sharper than usual, the power flickered out. Candlelight filled the apartment. Teo started crying, startled by the dark. Mireille moved to comfort him, but Jaehyun was already there, lifting the boy into his arms, whispering nonsense until the tears faded into hiccups. Mireille watched, eyes shining. "You finally stopped being afraid of what you might break." He looked at her, bouncing their son gently. "I realize some things aren't meant to be protected from the world. They're what protect me." Lightning flashed across their living room window. The storm outside seemed almost beautiful now, meaningless and distant. Days later, when the season's first snow threatened, they met Sungmin at a small riverfront cafe. He handed Teo a tiny dragon-carved keychain. "He shouldn't grow up without a story," Sungmin said, smiling. "Tell him his father once ran this city." Mireille laughed softly. "I think we'll tell him his father learned how to love." Sungmin raised his coffee in a toast. "Better legend." When he left, Jaehyun and Mireille lingered by the water. Wind carried hints of winter. She slipped her hand into his coat pocket, fingers searching until they found his. "We survived everything," she said. He kissed her forehead. "We didn't survive. We lived." That night, back home, Jaehyun tucked Teo in and stood by the crib longer than necessary. The baby's chest rose and fell like a promise being kept. Mireille came up beside him. "You watching over him or over yourself?" "Both," he said. "I used to watch my men while they slept, afraid someone might kill them. Now I just watch to remember what's worth protecting." "Do you ever think about coming back?" she asked gently, curious rather than afraid. "Every time I see injustice," he admitted. "But wanting to fight doesn't mean returning to war." "Then what does it mean?" "It means I finally understand strength." He looked at her. "Strength is staying." The next morning the storm cleared, sunlight bouncing off wet balconies. Steam rose from the streets like the city itself was sighing with relief. Jaehyun opened the window. The scent of rain and city food vendors drifted in. Mireille turned off the stove. "It's beautiful," she said. "It's quiet," he corrected. "Same thing, isn't it?" He considered that, then nodded. They ate breakfast together, Teo squealing each time crumbs landed near him. Simple chaos, the kind that made life real. Mireille leaned across the table. "You're still thinking?" "I keep expecting some old debt collector to call. Then change the number," she said. He laughed. "Right. Simple. Maybe peace is practical." She smiled. "Exactly." Late that afternoon they packed for a weekend trip, their first as a family. They would drive south to the sea again, the same road where everything had nearly ended, but this time with no destination except togetherness. Mireille strapped Teo into the car seat while Jaehyun loaded bags. She caught him glancing back at the building. "Say goodbye," she told him. He closed the trunk gently. "Goodbye, ghosts." It wasn't theatrical, it was truthful. The drive was slow, scenic, the kind of pacing he once would have hated. Now it felt right. When the sea appeared, Teo squealed again, waving his small hands at the endless blue. Mireille turned to Jaehyun. "You used to see this water as revenge. Now, he said. It looks like forgiveness." They stood together on the shore, wind cutting through the last chill of winter. His arm around her, her head against him, their child laughing at the foam. As dusk settled, he thought of everything that had brought him here. The empire, the fall, the discovery, the child, the woman who refused to stop holding him accountable. He realized none of it was tragedy, it was metamorphosis. Maybe this is what redemption actually sounds like. No applause, no thunder. Just a quiet house, a child breathing, a heart learning to rest. He took Mireille's hand and said, "For the first time in my life, I don't know what comes next." She smiled. "That's called living." They stood there until the first stars appeared, reflections dancing across the sea. If this ending filled your chest the way it filled mine, pause right here, tap subscribe, and share it forward, because stories like theirs remind us all that even in the darkest rain, love finds a way to stay. Jaehyun looked down at his wife and son, at the horizon stretching beyond reason, and whispered, "The rain finally stopped." Mireille answered, "Then let's never hide from the sun again."